Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia. I'm a student at launch school, and today I'm going to be interviewing a fellow student of mine. His name is James. Hi, James. How are you doing?
Hello, Felicia. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I've known James for a long time now. I think for about 2.5 years. I've known you since I first started launch school, and I think we first started launch school around the same time in 2019. So today he's going to be talking about his journey, and I just wanted to show you guys his experience and what the journey is like for him. So the first question I have for James is, where are you from and what were you doing before launch school?
Well, I'm from Brooksville, Florida, and before I started to attend USF, I worked at the University of South Florida. I worked in financial aid, and I helped create the financial literacy program at USF. So that was really cool. I got to develop that program from the ground up, helping students repay their student loans, figuring out budgets, credit counseling, all that good stuff. And after that, I helped start a pest control company with my brother. Did that for about a year, getting everything set
Wow.
up. And then after that, I decided I really wanted to do launch school because I figured it would force me to develop myself in a positive direction. So I've always had a little bit of trouble with focus, details, and dealing with complex issues or complex problems, I should say. And I
Mhm.
figured launch school would force me to go into a more positive direction and cultivate certain skills that I felt I could improve with.
Wow.
I spent all of 2 years in 109. So just getting through 109 was like a monumental achievement. I was more happy getting through 109 than I was getting my master's degree. It's like how momentous that was for me.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, that's
very.
amazing.
Yeah. It was just like, I don't know, the amount of rigor that launch school requires and the amount of like excellence that you have to put forth. And
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't naturally going to be able to deal with all of these details. It's like when I was in college, I was just like B's get degrees, but that doesn't fly at launch school. If you get an
It
A,
does
you're
not.
okay. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess they just have high standards, and I was the same way, college, B's and C's, sometimes A's, and that's okay, but not at launch school. So it really forces you to be literally the best that you can be, and if you're not at that level, to work hard and spend the time to get to that level.
I was always terrible at word problems too. So I was like, well, what am I not really good at? I'm not good at word problems, details, and like force myself to get A's. I know I'll focus specifically on that through launch school. So it's like, what am I not good at? All of this stuff. So I'm going to pursue something that I'm not good at that will
Yeah.
force me to be a better person.
Yeah, that's a really good thing about law school too, is that it forces you to find your weaknesses and forces you to work on them. Like those aren't things that you can't ignore while you're going through law school. You have to work on them to get better. So that's really cool. So you said you had a pest control company with your brother?
Mm-hmm.
Is so you never really wanted to become a programmer, or it wasn't something that you ever thought about becoming. It kind of just happened one day, or you just thought about becoming one?
Well, I've always been thinking about the idea of, pursuing something in tech, but I just never really took the plunge. Like when I was in middle school, I used to do a little bit, a tiny amount of programming with BASIC. And then when I was in high school, I worked on the high school webpage a little bit, but I
Mhm.
never took the plunge and did that like specifically. And in 2016, my dad passed away. So that kind of forced me to reevaluate like what I wanted to pursue. Life's short and you're dead a lot longer than you're alive. So I was like, if I don't get around to doing this now, it's probably not going to happen. So
Mhm.
it was a difficult decision, but I like the idea of having a really good career, um, going through what I think to be the best program, that you can possibly find, whether it's standard education or just software engineering.
Mhm.
So that's just something I really wanted to pursue, and I did. Maybe
That's
one day I'll
awesome.
get done with the back end.
I think you will, no matter how long it takes. So, how did you find launch school then?
That's a good question, man. Uh, I think I might have found it on Reddit or something because I found Launch School back when it was Tea Leaf Academy, but it was before I decided
Oh,
to do Launch School. So it was either through Reddit or just looking up random boot camps and something like that. And I might have found some information on Course Report and then had such positive reviews that I decided to look into it.
okay. Was there any other thing that helped you kind of decide that this is what you wanted to do?
And it was so long. I think the website might have been a bit different, but It was just the amount of positive praise that I saw for Tea Leaf Academy, or in this case, Launch School now,
Mhm.
and the fact that a lot of it was basically saying, "Don't do this." Like, it wasn't trying to sell you anything. It was basically trying to sell you on not pursuing launch school. Right? I just thought
Mhm.
that sounded really legit. Like, if you're trying to market something, a lot
Mhm.
of times you don't tell people not to pursue your product. So I thought that was pretty legit. And I
Yeah.
just figured that launch school, and from like all of the people that helped found launch school, like Chris Lee,
Mhm.
they're definitely competent veterans of the industry, so they knew what they were talking about. And having
Mhm.
something that was specifically mastery based is not something that I've found commonly. So I worked in higher ed for years, and everything was just rote memorization, uh,
Mhm.
catering to like you know the lowest common denominator. Where launch school basically makes you make yourself better, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's the best program out there.
Mhm. Besides launch school, were there any other resources you were using to learn how to code or boot camps you were looking at, or you kind of just found launch school, figured out that this is what you wanted, and you just went straight for that?
Yeah, that was pretty much the latter. Like, there was really nothing else that I was even considering. I figured launch school was the best, and that was the route that I was going to take. And then I did some code academy and some other random stuff like that, but no other programs.
I think you heard my story about when I was like doing free code camp and reading all these books and just for the longest time feeling so lost and confused and didn't really know what I was doing. And then I started looking for boot camps and I was in San Antonio at the time. I found a few, but they were so expensive, like ridiculously expensive. And I just knew that I couldn't do that because I had to leave university because I couldn't afford it. So it didn't make sense to, I mean, if I couldn't go to university, I couldn't go to a boot camp. So that was out of the question. And I didn't find law school when I looked for software engineering schools. I didn't see anything about it. But you know the story of how I found it, right?
Tell me again for all those wonderful people.
It was really weird because you know how you search certain things on your phone, and then eventually, I guess your phone learns like what you're looking for, and you'll start to see like news articles related to that type of thing. And so I guess my phone learned that I was looking for software engineering schools or boot camps, and yeah, I just couldn't find anything after a while, and I kind of gave up. And then one morning, I woke up, and the first thing that I did was, scroll through my news feed and then I saw an article that someone wrote about launch school saying something like, my experience going through launch school and how it was a great experience, something like that. And I was really intrigued because I saw launch school for software engineering and I was like, I've never heard of launch school. I didn't know there was like online schools for software engineering. I just thought there was boot camps and like classes and stuff like free code camp, but not actual schools. So I clicked on it and I read it and then at the end, it showed a link to Launch School. So I clicked the link and I spent like the next few days like obsessing over the Launch School website and trying to find reviews and everything that I could possibly find. And even with that, like I was still kind of skeptical because I just thought like, how are all these people having such good experience and loving this school? I've never heard of it. Like, is this a real school? Is this a scam? Does this actually exist? I kind of had to take a leap of faith there and just do it. It made it easier though with the prep course. So obviously you had to do the prep course too. And at the time when we started, there was only a Ruby track. We didn't have the luxury of choosing between Ruby or JavaScript. When you started, was there any specific language or any specific thing you wanted to learn? Or like at launch school, you start off with Ruby. Did you have any problems with that?
No, I think that's a great question because I think it's one of the more common questions. I just trusted the process. I didn't know anything about programming, so I figured if they want me to learn this language to learn the concepts, then I would. I just thought that maybe they're just teaching me the fundamentals so I don't have to learn a specific language. I can just learn how to think like a programmer and learn how to, deal with all the various concepts of software engineering. So that way, if I do decide to learn another language, it won't be a problem. I can even look at some Python stuff now and just see like, oh, okay, this is very similar to Ruby.
Yeah.
And this is just my personal bias, but I would suggest people definitely go the Ruby route. I love Ruby. It's my first programming language. And after looking at JavaScript, I really love Ruby. So it's like it's definitely the design philosophy is on point. It's all about making things easier for the programmer. And I look at JavaScript and I'm like, Yeah, I can see why that was made in 10 days. Like, no wonder that guy took a bunch of stuff and kind of shoved it together. And but I had no preconceived notions about whatever language I was going to learn. I just figured if I learned all of the fundamentals and how to think like a programmer, that I could just carry that to any job. And from what I've seen, from not even knowing any other programming languages, it's so much easier to learn a new language. It's like arrays are always arrays, hashes are always hashes. You're always going to have to break down problems. You're always going to have to, think about different solutions. So it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what language you're going to learn, especially since you're first starting off and you're trying to learn specific concepts. I would
Mhm.
recommend Ruby. And there's a reason why Launch School started off with Ruby is because they wanted to teach you the fundamentals, the concepts.
Mhm.
And looking at JavaScript, like, man, more power to all of you out there that learn JavaScript. That's all.
Oh gosh. Yeah, but I'm currently going through that right now because I started obviously in the Ruby track and I loved it. I love Ruby. And it it still is my favorite language. Now that I'm in JavaScript, there are times where I just think like, "Oh my gosh, if I had started off with JavaScript, I probably would have struggled a lot more and I don't know how long I would have stuck with it." But now that I have Ruby under my belt and have all those like fundamentals and basics, it makes the process of learning a second language so much easier. Yeah, if I had to choose, I would definitely do Ruby again. Would you do Ruby again?
No,
You
hands
probably
down.
would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hands down. It's like there just doesn't really seem to be any comparison. I know some people are trying to get through the program quicker, so
Hmm.
that's what they give the JavaScript a try. And JavaScript, I don't think that's ever going anywhere. Some people are
Yeah.
complaining a little bit about Ruby may not be as fast, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like if you know Ruby, you can easily learn Python. And if
Hmm.
once you learn JavaScript, you can probably use JavaScript forever. So
Yeah. Okay. So what are you up to now in the curriculum? What course are you in?
I'm in RB 130. So for all of you out there that are taking too long in a course, don't worry. I probably took longer than you. I spent 2 years in 109. And I think part of it was I had to learn command line, I had to learn Git, I had to learn Ruby. And I think I got into this weird position where I could read code, I could solve the problem logically. And a student told me that I had like this weird case where most students kind of have difficulty with breaking down the problem or trying to figure out a logical solution. I would be able to understand the problem and solve it like mentally, like really fast. But I got stuck in the two-layer domain there. I think that's what Launch School calls it. But I couldn't
Uh,
translate my logic to syntax. So I struggled with that and then got through that. And then 120 was easier than 109. And then 130 I find to be quite a bit easier than 120. It's still not easy per se, but it's definitely more intuitive, I guess.
Intuitive. You think so?
Yeah, dealing with procs and blocks and all closures and all that good stuff. And now I'm been working on some of the challenges, and those have been rather challenging. So I guess that's why they're called challenges. But hopefully, we'll get to those relatively soon. And then I'm really looking forward to 171 because I'm looking, or 170, I think it is.
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how the internet works and getting everything. So like slowly over time, like as you start off, you're like, it's kind of like the Karate Kid. You're not really sure why you're doing all this stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
you're doing all these little minuscule aspects. Like, what does this have to do with programming? And my mindset originally was like, I think a lot of people have this mindset. I thought programming was basically using a program to build other programs. So
Hmm.
when I thought of like programming languages, I thought of like Ruby was just like a program that I was going to use to build another program. But it's really different from that. And like I tend to be a very high level thinker. Like I think like the big picture,
Hmm.
and eventually you will get there, but you got to start off in the very, in the trenches dealing with all the details, and then slowly like you abstract more and more and more, and then you can see the big picture.
Hmm.
So
That
we're
makes sense.
slowly but
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I have the opposite problem. I can do the syntax and I can write the code. It's just I have the problem of breaking down the problem and thinking logically. And I think I've always struggled with that in school. I've always had trouble with, math and science and that type of thing and thinking really logically. So it kind of transferred over into launch school and I really struggle with that. But it's something I've gotten a lot better at. And on that topic of thinking at a bigger picture, I'm kind of in that boat now. Like when I was first learning Ruby, yeah, nothing made sense. I had no context for anything. I didn't know why I was learning these things. And as I moved on through the courses, it started all come together and it made sense. But now that I'm in JavaScript, I kind of feel like I'm in that same boat with object-oriented programming. Like there's all these weird concepts that I'm learning that I haven't really dealt with before. And I think my brain is trying so hard to find connections between object-oriented programming in JavaScript and Ruby. Even though some of these things aren't the same, there's a little bit of things that are similar, but it seems like these are totally different things and they work in a different way. And so now, as I'm learning these things, I'm thinking, what is the point of all this? Like, why are we learning this? Or I would see something like this isn't like closures are a really powerful feature or important feature, but I'm thinking like, why are they important? How are they powerful? Like I want to know how will I be using this in the real world? So I'm still struggling with that, trying to understand that. So I guess I need to kind of scale back and just worry about learning the thing first and worrying about that later when I need to.
I think it's definitely relevant, and that does make sense because, like, as you learn and as you start to cultivate more knowledge about JavaScript, all that stuff is going to make more sense, and then you will be able to incorporate that more easily. It's like from what I've seen, that there hasn't been anything in launch school that is not going to be beneficial to you. If anything, like everything they teach you is primarily what you should be focusing on. So if you just trust, like, that they know what they're doing, I mean, which obviously they do, and there's so much stuff out there to study. Like one of the benefits of launch school is having a systematic approach to solving, or not solving, systematic approach to solving a problem, systematic approach to going through a curriculum and dealing with stuff. So
Yeah.
that's why you just focus on the fundamentals. That's going to carry over to every other language.
Hmm.
Good. Then
Yeah.
you can pick like where you want to focus or what specifically you want to go into.
Are you more interested in the back end part of software engineering or more the front end, or you're kind of still figuring that out?
It's a good question. Like I'm thinking I'm probably going to be more interested in the front end, even though I haven't done really anything in the front end yet. But yeah, I think I would like to be the person that's kind of in charge of how the website looks, and customer satisfaction and the user interface. That just seems more interesting to me. And plus, a lot of people don't like the front end, so I figure I'll be the
Really?
front end guy. Yeah, like everybody, like I would say this is totally unofficial, but I would just guess that probably like 80 to 85% of launch school students want to do back end development. So
I'd be one of those. I really love knowing what's going on behind the scenes. I guess knowing what's happening behind there, takes all the mystery away. And to me, that's just more interesting. I guess I am interested in how things work and how the user interacts with different programs and stuff like that. Like, that's super interesting to me. Do you have any idea of what you want to do after launch school?
Um, at this point, I'm just kind of focusing on getting through launch school. So, but I think maybe at some point I would like to work remotely. I think my ideal job would be if I could get something where I could work remotely 3 days a week and then go to an office 2 days a week. Because I'm pretty extroverted, so I do enjoy having like the social dynamics with other people in the office. But at this point, I don't really have anything too specific of what I want to do. Maybe something front end, but other than that, crossing that bridge when I get there.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people are that way. I'm like that way too. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do after launch school and capstone. Um, and sometimes I have a little anxiety about that because I kind of want to know the direction I'm going in. But at the same time, it feels like learning all the fundamentals and the basics of all these things, there's so much that's opened up to you afterwards. And it doesn't really matter which direction you go in because most likely you'll be really good at what you're doing by that point.
Yeah, I would think so because even individuals that are very experienced software engineers still attend launch school to hone their fundamentals. So if these people have like really good careers, yet they still decide to join launch school because there's lacking of certain knowledge that they may have. So I
Mhm.
think once you learn all those fundamentals, you could do probably literally anything that you set your mind to in terms of software.
That's what I think too. It makes it easier. You kind of know you're going in this general direction, but you don't know specifically what's going to happen at the end, which is kind of a little scary, but it's also really cool because you don't really know what you're going to be doing. And I mean, there's just so much open to you at the end, even if you're not sure what it is exactly.
I would say like, well, one thing with launch school is like the standard is excellence and it's not an option. Another thing, capstone, if you can get into it, is very legit. I mean, there's been quite a bit of skepticism about launch school salaries and whatnot, but if you go through, even just say core, you can still get a good job, but let alone capstone. So if you have these individuals that get really good grades and they go through capstone and you're like honing on this specific project and you make some really good application, yeah, then There's no reason why you should not believe those salaries. And plus, like launch school is very open with like their salaries and everything. So I know there's some skepticism about all of these individuals getting accepted to a specific career. And I
Hmm.
think even with like core, I don't think anyone that's finished core hasn't been able to find a job, at least to my knowledge.
That's true.
I would say that's true. I would say you're going to have to apply a lot of effort to get through it. One thing that I wish I did do more is I wish I, because when I first started launch school, I got the book Head First Ruby. I think the Head First series is excellent. But I wish I had gotten Head First How to Think Like a Programmer beforehand, because that was kind of like what I struggled with a little bit in terms of like maybe just breaking things down. I could solve things in my mind, but I could not translate that into the syntax. So I
Hmm.
don't know if I had some disconnect there. Something else maybe someone would ask is it, what is it like to study by yourself? Because you don't have an environment to gauge in your studies with. I think naturally I learn best in a group. So unfortunately for me, like a lot of launch school is, self-driven, and it's like you go through your studies. It doesn't have to be, but you go through your studies on yourself or on your own. So I think reaching out to people, getting into groups, attending the spot sessions, attending TA sessions are key to being able to fully get, your true educational experience out of launch school. So I would be a little, if I was like first starting launch school, I would be like, what is it like to study by myself? And
Hmm.
especially if you're like more extroverted or you require, visual and auditory, stimulation to like kind of understand things.
Hmm.
I think that would be a valid question. What's the community like? The community at launch school is great. When you have people that are trying to aspire to some form of excellence, it brings about a certain type of person to join that community. So whether it's meetups or helping people out or giving back to the community just to try to make sure everybody else can succeed,
Hmm.
I think it's probably one of the testaments to what launch school is all about. So
I think so. I think it's one of the best parts about launch school. Online school, learning by yourself, it's very isolating, it's very lonely, and it's really hard to sometimes find people who are, on the same schedule as you, same time zone, things like that. And so you are forced to come out and find people to study with, and that can get difficult sometimes. And just the whole socializing aspect, we're not going to class every day, hanging out with people. We're usually at home with our families or, otherwise. So it's really nice to have this community now with Spot and the social network to make, I guess, the journey seem less lonely. And for an online school, I think the community is really, I guess, vibrant and very active and engaging. Is there anything about launch school that you don't like or that you find, you know, really difficult?
well, I found some of the curriculum difficult, but other students didn't find it as difficult. So that's not a negative thing on launch school's part. It's just the amount of rigor and effort that I had to put into get where I'm at.
Hmm.
I would say maybe one negative would be there are not a lot of videos in terms of like breaking down solutions for different problems. Like when you're doing prep, like I think every problem has a video solution, and that
Hmm.
was really beneficial to me. And when you get into the curriculum, I think there are videos for certain exercises like tic tac toe and stuff, but
Hmm.
there's not really a video and breaking down of like all the other problems like there were for the prep course. So I guess that might be a negative or an area for improvement.
Mm.
um, Other than that, I can't really think of is there's like so many like the positives outweigh anything that would be detrimental, I would think.
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to think too, and I can't really point anything out besides, I guess, the material, the stuff we're actually learning is difficult sometimes. But other than that, I don't really see any downsides. But yes, those videos do help with the exercises. There's a lot of exercises in the core that are really kind of hard. Do you remember that after midnight problem?
I remember after midnight in like the
What century is
actual
this?
century, yeah, that one.
I
Oh,
feel like everyone has trouble on that problem. I don't know why. I don't know, maybe the concept of what was it like time and degrees and stuff is kind of just new or it's not really that common as a problem. So I
yeah,
feel like having a video explanation would be really helpful to help us kind of see what's going on.
for sure, I agree with that. And I think that's one of the strengths of launch school is I think it's from so many years of experience in the industry that they know specifically what a person new to the field would probably struggle with. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the questions, they may feel like trick questions, especially the quizzes. Like I made a meme a while ago that said like, when I get a B on my quiz, I'm not going to cry, but no, I'm thinking, well, that's not too bad. But when I get a B plus on my test, I'm going to cry about it. So
Yeah.
it's like, most like the only place when you get like a D on your quiz, you're like, cool, I did really well. But then when you get a B on your test, you're like bummed out. So,
Yeah.
so that's like part to keep in mind, I guess. But yeah, other than that, I can't really think of any major thing for improvement. Other than I wish there were more video and auditory aspects of the lessons, but
Hmm.
I can't think of anything else really.
Do you have any cool hobbies or anything that you do besides law school?
Yeah. Well, as you can see here, I have my microphone, so I like to do little mini podcasts, and I stream on Twitch. I have like a channel pretty much on like all of the major social media websites. So like I did a video a little while ago about Cleopatra. So this is kind of cool. Like I just read some articles, and because I think they found her tomb with Mark Antony, so that was pretty cool. So I just did like a little video
Mm.
about it. It's got like 4,000 views. So I was like, oh, my phone started like pinging. I'm like, what's going on? Like I have like 40 subscribers now, which is like a milestone for me. So I wasn't
Wow.
expecting any kind of, pings or whatever. But I was like, what? Well, that's really cool. So yeah, I like streaming games and stuff like that, talking about cool, interesting topics. I love board games, Game of Thrones, Nemesis. I like using old-fashioned tools. Like I have an old sweet, well, it's actually a new, but like an old style Swedish axe and hatchet. I'd like to
Wow.
travel and tabletop, like D&D, like all throughout object-oriented programming. I was doing like all of my code in terms of like barbarians and monsters, and that was beneficial.
That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, so play a little guitar here and there, and that's pretty much it that I can think about. How
Wow.
about yourself? Do we know what kind of living hobbies you have, Felicia? I'm gonna turn the script here.
Um, well, I do play video games when I can. I really love playing video games. It's so fun. I like playing Blasphemous and Dark Souls, Bloodborne, that type of
You
dark
love
kind of thing.
dark and gritty games. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't expect you to play that. That's like such a contrast of like maybe that's they use that to like lay out like your dark side. So that's cool.
Yes. I love that type of thing. I don't know why. It's really interesting to me. And it's kind of a little embarrassing, but when I get to like a boss fight in Dark Souls or Blasphemous, they're really hard. That's why they're boss fights, and I die 1,000 times, and I'm so angry. But when I finally beat the boss, I'm like, I feel so good and I feel awesome. And one day I was like, you know what? The assessments that I'm taking are like boss fights, and sometimes it'll take me a few tries, to pass the test, but eventually I do, and I feel amazing. And so now when I go into assessments, I get into the mindset like I do when I'm playing video games and I'm trying to beat a boss. I'm at the fog wall and I'm ready to go in and I'm ready to, kill the boss and pass the
Such a great
test.
analogy. That's a great analogy. Yeah. Think of like the TAs as the boss, I guess you gotta get. I
That's
mean,
how,
well, I
yeah.
mean, some of them are for whatever reason they've taken on like their own urban legend throughout launch.
I think so. That's just how I've been seeing it lately, and kind of makes it fun. So I'm like, oh, this is just another boss fight that I have to get through, and then I move on to the next area of discovery or whatever. So yeah, I like doing that. I like to read. I just finished a book right now. It's called Mexican Gothic. Again, like really dark stuff. I'm just into that kind of thing. Anything else?
Don't give up. If you decide to do launch school, just keep at it, and eventually you'll get through it. And there's some really good articles out there that you can find inspiration, podcasts like this. Introduce yourself to the community, say what's up, and try to get a study group going, especially if you're remotely extroverted, because it can be a bit tiresome just sitting there, with your eyes glazing over at times looking at code. So
Yeah, that was
reach
me today. So
out. I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks for having me. This is really cool. I appreciate you reaching out.
yeah, thanks for being here. That's it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions for me or James, you can put them down in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed learning about James and his journey through launch school. So thank you.